Hi again guys, let's have a conversation, shall we, about some of the guns being used in the Airsoft Plus events. Of course, I have been featuring this M4, Tokyo Marui Recoil Shock or electric blowback. One thing I have to say about this and about these larger guns in particular is that, of course, they have an enormous amount of power when it comes to playing Airsoft Plus using 3-round burst. And I find that, these bigger guns have a certain advantage, of course, in some circumstances, but there are some disadvantages with these guns, of course. And of course, not only in the games themselves, because sometimes guys have difficulty taking, if they're right-handed, a so-called right-hand turn, where the turn is on the right and they're right hand dominant, and so they have to somehow go around the corner by twisting their back. Not everyone can do that effectively, and so some people like to go for something a little bit smaller. As well, the bit about these M4 from Tokyo Marui and other guns that are electric blowback or recoil shock is the expense. These things are quite expensive, and so some guys just feel a little bit shy about buying such an expensive gun, and so they go to other guns. And I have to say that there's a slight bit of, or maybe quite a bit of, prejudice when it comes between guys who use the bigger guns and guys who use the lesser guns. When I say the word lesser gun, I don't mean in any way that it's less of a gun, but they are smaller and more compact. But let me just talk a little bit about that, because I find that sometimes a bit annoying that there's this prejudice towards guys who want to use smaller guns and guys who want to use guns with less meter per second or less power in them. There's something about a guy who uses a big gun. He kind of looks at guys, look at the other guns, saying, well, it's not a manly gun or something like that. I find that a little bit disconcerting, that there's this prejudice between guys who spend quite a bit of money building up a really big gun, and then they make fun of, or they secretly say, yeah, it's not a real man or not a real airsoft player because he's using a smaller gun. So let me, for example, talk about one in particular that I like to use. Here we have it. It's this AEP. It's the MP7. Now, I know quite a few guys call these smaller guns kids' guns or toys. And I have to say, well, even if you're using a Tokyo Marui M4 or something else, it is a toy when you're talking about airsoft. So I find it a bit odd that some guys call these smaller guns toys. So what's really nice about using this MP7 is that I can accessorize it a bit differently. I can make it look a little bit cool, for example. Here it's been painted up. I even have had someone paint on the side here a really nice Canadian flag, which I think is kind of cool. So, of course, I can also put, if I like, a suppressor on it to make it even look a little bit better or nicer, or at least give it a little bit more length. Now, the reason I'm talking about these guns is that when you're playing in the normal Airsoft events, the K-15 events, or say Airsoft Academy events, these guns are notoriously difficult to count, meaning that when someone is firing when you're firing this gun, the other players have difficulty in counting the hits, because it's very, very light. In some cases, I would say it's even lighter than using a spring-loaded pistol. And that's, one difficulty some guys have in using these guns. that you have to get really close to your target. And some people just seem a little bit shy. They want to use a bigger gun and stand further away and fire with enormous power. With an MP7 like this, though, of course, you can't do that. You have to get quite close. Definitely here at the back alley CQC is designed for guns like this. You don't have to use a lot of power. You just have to use skill in taking the corners. And with this one, you can certainly, when you're right-handed dominant, and you want to make a right-hand turn, this certainly does aid quite a bit in helping you get that technique before you start using a much larger gun. Certainly the MP7 can help. As well, about the idea of counting the hits, one nice thing about using an MP7 in Airsoft Plus is that we're using a 3-round burst. And that's quite unique in Airsoft inside. What I like about that is that when you're firing a 3-round burst at targets in the game area, they have a tendency to count them. That there isn't this problem. Okay, when I'm using my M4, yeah, I can fire the gun and blast away 3-round bursts. And what's interesting about that is that the rounds bounce everywhere and they smack off the walls, and the guys feel so much power when they smack off the walls that, of course, they're putting their hands up. This one, though, is a little bit different. You still have to get close to your target. And when you're firing it, I find that when it's fired on this 3-round burst, I'm getting many more hits, clean hits, people cleanly counting it than I did when I fired this on semi-automatic. So I think that a lot of guys have to get over their prejudice of the so-called lesser guns, because, you know, I think where they're playing in K-15 events or older events, they see the smaller guns as being less effective. But in Airsoft Plus, I find these are extraordinarily effective guns, and I really enjoy using it. I have to tell you, honestly, the only difficulty I really have in using this gun is the fact of the other players. That they look at it in some ways being a toy or a kid's gun. And that's one thing that I think we really have to change the attitude when we're playing Airsoft inside. So get over that attitude that you have to have a really big gun and a lot of money and a lot of expense to build up a really big, powerful gun. That's not true at all. I think that we have to get away from that attitude, especially in Airsoft Plus. That the smaller guns, meaning the in length and so forth, are just as much fun and just as effective to use. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I'm going to demonstrate how this gun fires with a 3-round burst with some targets, and you let me know how that goes. A couple of comments about firing a 3-round burst with an MP7 has to do with the battery. That is always a problem with the MP7, is that battery that is inserted inside the gun itself. People say, hey, it loses its power quite quickly. Well, that's true, they do. Outside, they lose their power quickly. However, inside, the nice thing about it is that we have things like electricity and plugs and chargers right in our off games. So of course you can have a battery change every single time that you're playing. And the point about the MP7 and the battery is that when you have a very fresh battery, it's really easy to do a 3-round burst. If the battery is a little bit lowered, or if the battery is drained somewhat, then it's very difficult to fire in a 3-round burst. I mean, you can do the technique I taught about this son of a bitch and the finger control to make it work. It just seems a little bit laggy, and where there's this small little inner trigger device on the MP7, it just seems more difficult to do. So when you have a fresh battery in, though, I find it extraordinarily easy to use firing a 3-round burst. As well, that what's really nice about firing this on a 3-round burst is how the magazines are combat loaded. So if you look at a very typical magazine like this, there are 50 rounds that can fit in it. Well, the real steel MP7, you can load 20, 30, or 40 rounds depending on the size of the magazine. So that means you can fit in 40 rounds inside this magazine, which really is helpful when you have a tendency to shoot a lot like I do. And of course, it's really easy to do, to load the magazine with only 40 rounds when it's designed for 50. It's pretty simple. On the side of all of the speed loaders, they are graduated. So here we have 30, 50, 60, 75. So all I need to do then to load it is load it in between enough rounds up to the point where it's in between 30 and 50. That will give me roughly 40 rounds. So it can be combat loaded very, very easily. Okay, so here I have my MP7 magazine. I just loaded it. I didn't particularly count how many rounds are in it. I'm just going to fire 3-round bursts at this target. And I have my trusty MP7 here. I have left the suppressor on to give me a little bit more ability to aim, a little bit more of an aiming point. And of course, I'm using iron sights. So, and here I have my GoPro, which I'll put on top of my head. And so you can see I'm going down all the way down to the end of the turkey shoot. And so let's just actually see how this goes. I'm expecting the rounds to be on the target. Not exactly sure how the grouping will look, but anything on the target, I think, with the MP7 will be good. Anyway, let's just have a look. Well, slightly scattered. When MP4, it has a much longer barrel, and so probably the grouping would be far more accurate because of that. However, you have to admit that when we're firing an MP7, that the grouping moves around a little bit. Still on target, but the group isn't very small. I have to admit I'm pretty satisfied with that. Okay, it's firing on 3-round burst, and it is quite a short-barreled airsoft gun. So I'm very happy with that. You know, it's a stock gun. Let me just turn the GoPro off here. It's a stock. There's no modification made whatsoever to the barrel, a few years old as well. So I have to say I'm happy with that. So maybe some of you might be thinking, hey, you know, Philip, that wasn't very good shooting. I don't know. You try it. So thanks so much, guys. Thank you. Get out!
Wow, that's what a 3-round burst will do. Bye guys, they're respawning. Yeah.
I'm coming from the right. Oh.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry.
Why are you shooting me? Crossing the house. Okay, there's a thing called simultaneous hits. It's up to you, Robert. You don't have to. If you felt that it wasn't simultaneous enough, I trust your judgment, Robert. No worries.